They say civilizations fall in fire, in blood, in the clash of empires and the howling of invaders. But what if I told you that the greatest collapse in ancient history began with an ingredient, a metal so rare, so essential, that when the world lost its supply, everything, from kings to farmers, fell with it. This is the story of how the world ended, not with a war, but with a shortage. Let me take you back, more than 3,000 years, to an age when bronze wasn't just a material. It was the foundation of everything. The world of the late Bronze Age was astonishingly connected. More connected, perhaps, than most people today realize. Great kingdoms stretched across the eastern Mediterranean, Egypt powerful and ancient, the Hittite Empire vast and disciplined, the Mycenaean Greeks fierce and ambitious, Babylon, Assyria, Cyprus, Canaan, all part of a global web of trade, diplomacy, letters, and alliances. They traded gold, grain, horses, ivory, wood, oils, but above all, they traded metal, and in this world, bronze was king. To make bronze, you needed copper, easy enough to find, and you needed tin, almost impossible to find. Tin was the magic ingredient that turned soft copper into a weapon, a tool, a symbol of power. But here's the catch. Tin deposits were scattered like crumbs on the map. A little in Afghanistan, some in Central Asia, some, maybe, in faraway Cornwall and traces in Anatolia. None of the great powers had enough of their own, so they depended on each other, on caravans, on ships, on merchants who crossed deserts and oceans. A fragile chain held the world together, and no one noticed how thin the links had become. Letters preserved in clay show kings pleading, sometimes angrily, for tin. One king writes, "Send the tin immediately. My smiths are idle. My armies wait." Another threatens to cut ties if a shipment doesn't arrive. Another accuses a merchant of cheating him with inferior metal. These letters, once buried under centuries of dust, reveal something extraordinary. Even at the height of their power, the Bronze Age kings were terrified of shortages. They knew they were vulnerable, but they didn't know how vulnerable. The first signs of trouble didn't look like doom, they looked like inconvenience. A caravan delayed, a shipment lost, a price increase here or there. The kings grumbled. The merchants shrugged. Nobody realized these were the early tremors of an approaching earthquake. Across the Mediterranean, storms battered coastlines more frequently. Droughts grew longer, harvests dipped, bandits and rebels seized opportunities in weakening borderlands. A fortress fell here, a port shut down there. Each disruption was small, isolated, forgettable. But tin doesn't care about borders. A single broken link could choke the entire chain, and the links were breaking. By around 1250 BCE, bronze production across the Near East began to wobble. Archaeologists today can see it in the metal itself. Bronze alloys suddenly changing, becoming inconsistent, mixed with impurities. Tools were being reforged, recycled, melted down. Old statues vanished, chopped into pieces. The world was running out of tin, and that was a problem too big for any king to admit. Weapons became harder to replace. Chariots, ancient tanks, became impossible to maintain at full strength. Armies shrank or grew desperate. Local rebellions erupted, no longer afraid of weakened royal forces. And then came the blow that the world would never recover from. The city of Ugarit was a jewel of the eastern Mediterranean. Its docks were always crowded, its warehouses full, its scribes perpetually bent over clay tablets. It was one of the most important trade hubs for tin and copper. One day, a message arrived for the king of Ugarit, a message of fear. "Enemy ships are sighted. They have burned the lands. Send help." The king wrote, "Act frantic. Where are the ships you promised? Where are the troops? My city is undefended. I have no bronze weapons left." But the help never came. The tin shipments that were supposed to reach the city, they never arrived. The warehouses were empty. The smiths had nothing to forge. When the enemy reached Ugarit, the city was already beaten. Its final letter, baked in clay by accident as the city burned, was never delivered. The collapse had begun. Other cities fell soon after. Troy burned. Hattus, capital of the Hittite Empire, abandoned. Mycenaean palaces shattered, ports emptied. Caravans vanished. To later generations, it looked like a sudden storm of war. In reality, it was a chain reaction. Every city depended on another. Every kingdom relied on tin. When one part broke, the rest followed. It wasn't an invasion that toppled the Bronze Age. It was vulnerability. As the crisis spread, kings tried everything to survive. They ordered old weapons melted down. They cut the amount of tin used in bronze. They attempted to switch to arsenic bronze, poisonous and unpredictable. They begged neighbors for metal, gold, even food. Some tried to forge new trade routes, searching desperately for new tin mines. But by then, it was too late. The world economy was collapsing, and every attempt to repair it was like trying to sail a broken ship in a storm. Even Egypt, the mighty kingdom of the Nile, felt the strain. Grain ran short. Armies shrank. Taxes increased. Letters from the period speak of hunger, fear, shortages. Civilization was choking quietly before the final blow. For a moment, it looked like the world might recover. A few kings managed temporary alliances. A few cities rebuilt. But the underlying problem remained. No tin, no bronze, no army, no state. Into this weakened world came migrations and raiders, the groups later called the Sea Peoples. Their identity is still debated, but their timing was perfect. They weren't the cause of the collapse. They were the final wave that washed over a world already drowning. Without bronze weaponry, the great kingdoms had no way to resist. The invaders walked into a broken world, one that had lost its ability to fight, feed itself, or rebuild. Civilizations that had stood for centuries crumbled in a generation. When the fires died down, the late Bronze Age was gone. What followed was a dark age lasting centuries. Writing nearly disappeared, cities shrank, trade halted, knowledge vanished. Iron eventually replaced bronze, but iron technology came too late to save the old world. By the time societies mastered it, the empires of the Bronze Age were only memories buried under ruins. The world had turned a page, not with conquest, but with scarcity. Now here's the part that feels less like history and more like prophecy. Because the real story of the Bronze Age collapse isn't about tin, it's about dependence. Civilizations don't fall because of one disaster. They fall because they build themselves on systems they believe will never break, until they do. The Bronze Age relied on tin. We rely on something else. We rely on lithium for batteries, cobalt for electronics, nickel for steel, rare earths for magnets, semiconductors for everything. Like the Bronze Age, our economy depends on long, fragile chains stretching across continents. One disruption, one mine, one factory, one ort can send shockwaves around the world. We've seen glimpses already. A single factory fire stalling global car production, drought slowing the Panama Canal, a pandemic halting supply chains, geopolitical tensions threatening microchip exports. The Bronze Age didn't collapse because people were primitive. It collapsed because the world was advanced and interconnected, and utterly dependent on materials it couldn't easily replace, just like us. So what should we learn from the fall? Of Ugarit, of Hattusa, of Mycenae, perhaps this: civilizations don't collapse when their enemies become strong. They collapse when their supply chains become weak. The kings of the Bronze Age believed their world was permanent. They believed their alliances would hold. They believed their ships would arrive on time. They believed the tin would keep flowing, until one day it didn't, and everything that depended on it. Every kingdom, every palace, every great city went dark. If you want to explore Morfurg Otten stories of how ancient crises shaped the modern world, consider subscribing. Leave a like to help this story reach more curious minds, because the Bronze Age may be long gone, but its warning is more alive than ever. Narrator, thank you for listening. Until next time, remember, civilizations don't fall in a moment. They fall long before anyone notices.